Hi and welcome to Tour Talk, the Pro Golf podcast with me, your host Graham. This week just gone saw the conclusion of the PGA Tour Fall Series and the end of that season, and also the end of the LPGA Tour season. So today we're going to be breaking down what happened at the RSM Classic on the PGA Tour, and also what happened at the Tour Championship on the LPGA Tour. As well as that, we'll be hooking you up with all the latest news from the world of professional golf. So let's head straight over to the RSM Classic on the PGA Tour. And weirdly, it's one of those events that the actual winner sometimes isn't actually the biggest story of the entire event. However, we will start with the winner, and it was well deserved from Sami Välimäki. He's had a really good run through the full season and finished runner-up tied second in the Worldwide Technologies a couple of weeks ago, carried some form into last week and then added to that form this week to take home the win. He picked up $1.2 million in prize money, 500 FedEx Cup points, a 2-year exemption for his victory. Additionally, the win moved Sami Välimäki to 51st on the FedEx Cup rankings. So not only did he get a win, the FedEx Cup points, the 2-year exemption, he also now gained access to the first 2 signature events of 2026. That's the AT&T at Pebble Beach and the Genesis. So what a fantastic full series it has been for Sami Välimäki. His tour season coming from the DP World Tour onto the PGA Tour maybe wasn't quite as he'd hoped, but he really stepped up in these last few events, put some great rounds on the board. Like I say, finished second at the Worldwide, which basically secured his card for next year, but then followed that up with just a fabulous win. He held a really great putt on the 16th hole, which really kept his momentum going and allowed him to just finish off with some pars and take down the title and all the benefits that come with it. So congratulations to Sami Välimäki for his first win, and he also becomes the first Finnish winner on the PGA Tour. The main talking part about this event, being as it's the end of the full season though, is who sits on that bubble and can anybody play their way into the top 100. Interestingly, there was no one who played their way in to the top 100, and so Karl Vilips secures 100th spot by a mere 2 points from Lee Hodges and retains his card for next year. The only person that did make some moves throughout the week was Ricky Castillo, but he was in, then he was out, and then he remained out. So interestingly, no one from the RSM Classic managed to play their way into the top 100. So 2 of the players that I mentioned last week who were the bigger names sitting right on top of the bubble were Matt Wallace and Beau Hossler. But neither of those managed to do anything decent at the RSM, and therefore they couldn't move themselves up into the top 100. They now sit in this slightly unusual 100 to 110 place where they will get some starts, but it's then a question of obviously what that means for their career. And with players like Matt Wallace, does he chance that, or does he move back full-time to the DP World Tour where he's been very successful as a player? One of the other big name players who has really struggled this year and couldn't make it near the top 100 was Matt Kuchar. Now he's really interesting because he's obviously no spring chicken. He's not eligible for the Champions Tour as of just yet, but at 118th on the FedEx list, he really doesn't have any viable status, but don't expect him to be a sort of player that would want to go back and battle it through on the Corn Ferry Tour. I think interestingly, it may well be that this year he chooses to use his career tour earnings to gain his exemption onto the tour. By that time, hopefully he might be able to play himself in next year, but then also he'll be another year closer to being able to play Champions Tour, which is obviously very lucrative for people as they just turn 50, and he may be able to hold on to enough playing for the next couple of 3 years before he hits that figure. So maybe expect to see Matt Kuchar still on the PGA Tour next year, but using his career tour earnings exemption. I think one of the other interesting people is Joel Dahmen. Now, obviously, last season he was in and around that bubble, but managed to play his way in. This year, with it dropping down to 100 people as opposed to 125, he couldn't make that, and he would finish his 122nd, and that may mean that he has to head back to the Corn Ferry Tour and try to gain his PGA Tour card for 2027 that way. The PGA Tour is now becoming a very, very tough school. It always has been, but it looks like the new commissioner and new leadership is really looking to streamline the tour, streamline the amount of players, and possibly going forward, even streamline the number of events that appear on the tour. And this obviously now makes it much, much harder for players to maintain their cards. There's basically 25 people that would have qualified this season in the top 125 that don't make it now into 2026 because it's only the top 100. However, having said that, if you've been on the PGA Tour and you've had all season to try and gain the points to maintain your playing privileges, if you haven't done that, I guess the only place you can look at is at yourself in the mirror and say that unfortunately you just didn't quite have enough to be able to maintain your card. So ultimately now, that's the PGA Tour done until the start of next year. Obviously the players will take a break, but over this year we've seen Scotty doing Scotty things, we've seen Rory being Rory, and we've seen names like Ben Griffin and JJ Spawn push themselves into the limelight. I'll do a pod coming up over the next few weeks that looks back at the PGA Tour season, looks at the highlights, any lowlights, and what basically happened throughout the season. So stay tuned to make sure that you don't miss anything. Okay, so that's the PGA Tour season over and done with. So now let's head over to the LPGA Tour, as it was their Tour Championship. And there was two main questions coming into the event. And that was, could world number one Jeeno Thitikul repeat her 2024 win, secure the title and cement her place as clearly the best female golfer on the planet? And the second story was, can Nelly Calder win this event to make sure that she doesn't go 2025 without an LPGA Tour victory? After last year's historic performance on the LPGA Tour, I don't think anybody would have expected Nelly Calder not to have won an event this year. The simple answer to the Jeeno Thitikul question was yes. The simple answer to the Nelly Calder question was no. Thitikul was in control all week, hovering around the lead and finishing 26 under par, 4 ahead of fellow Thai Pajari Ananurukan, with Nelly Calder putting up a fight and finishing third on 20 under. Thitikul takes home the CME Globe again. She takes home $4 million in prize money, one of the biggest purses in LPGA Tour history, and cements herself as clearly the best female golfer on the planet at this current time. Not only does she win the CME Globe, she's the Rolex Player of the Year. She wins the Vare Trophy for a scoring average of 68.68, which is the lowest in the Tour's 75-year history. She topped the strokes gained total at 2.96, a full 0.64 ahead of closest rival Minjee Lee. It was basically just a really dominant season from Thitikul. Her stats just are absolutely amazing. With just one missed cut from 20 starts at this year's US Women's Open, no other finishes outside the top 30, 14 top 10s, and 3 victories, she sits firmly atop of the Rolex World Rankings by a good fair margin and seems peerless at this current time at just 22 years of age. Surely majors aplenty are the next thing in Thitikul's sights, and 2026 could prove once again to be a great year for this amazing golfer. Although, as always, wins will be tough to come by with such strength in depth on the LPGA Tour these days. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for an LPGA recap that will be coming up in the coming weeks. Okay, finally, so let's hit the news headlines around professional golf this week. First off, let's talk about Live Golf and their first signing of the off-season, which is Frenchman Victor Perez, who joins Martin Kaymer's cliques for the 2026 season. Is this a huge cue for Live? Not really, in my opinion. Perez looked like he was likely to lose his PGA Tour card as he sat outside the top 100 in the FedEx before he chose to sign the LIV contract. So it's not really a massively huge announcement for LIV, but it is another player. He has played PGA Tour and he is a multiple-time DP World Tour winner. So does it set the golfing world on fire? No. Is it a reasonably solid signing for LIV? Yeah, probably. So ultimately, does this make the cliques a force to be reckoned with in next year's LIV team event? And quite frankly, for me, the answer's no. The team consists of Martin Kaymer, Richard Bland, Adrian Meronk, and now Perez. And there's certainly stronger teams in the league than this. In other LIV news, the 2 qualifying places from the International Series on the Asian Tour have gone to Scott Vincent, who returns to LIV Golf, having played there previously and having won the series this year, and also to Yosuke Asagi from Japan, who fills the 2nd spot from the International Series, gaining his LIV card. No real news on which teams they'll be joining as of yet, so we'll wait and see. In other LIV gossip, and this is an interesting one, it seems like there's news and rumour around Laurie Canter forgoing his PGA Tour card that he secured just last week by finishing in the top 10 on the DP World Tour, which meant he gained PGA Tour status. But the rumour is now that he's going to be rejoining LIV Golf. Now, hopefully that does mean that if he does, Dan Brown, who finished in 11th in the DP World Tour, can get promoted up and can get his PGA Tour card. And obviously for Laurie Canter, you can sort of understand this. He's obviously played LIV before. And interestingly, I think with the Majestics having now lost Henrik Stenson through relegation, there's now a spot in that team. Laurie Canter's filled in that team previously, and ultimately that would now make that an all-English team. Again, does this make the Majestics a team to be reckoned with in LIV for next season? And again, I've got to say probably no. I think unfortunately for that team, with Poulter and Westwood having not really done that much in the last couple of years and seemingly to be on the decline, it almost feels that like Laurie Canter would actually be the best player in that squad. But I just don't think it's a good enough team to be able to really contend in LIV. It hasn't done up to now, and Laurie Canter doesn't bring the world of class that that team probably needs to be able to feature at the top of the leaderboards. It seems to me that this is something that's happening in LIV, and I think with the team format, I think it's very, very difficult to pick a team to support. Obviously, it looks like a number of the teams are now moving themselves to try and be national team units. So you've got the South African team, the Australian team. If Canter moves to the Majestics, then that would be an all-English team. And to add to that, it looks like Sergio Garcia may well be trading Abraham Ancer out to one of the other teams and bringing in Spanish player Luis Massivo, who's been a reserve on LIV Golf. And that would ultimately then create his team, which would be an entirely Spanish team, and also may well get a rename in the process. I think this is quite interesting and probably one of the only ways that perhaps this team format can actually succeed at LIV. I think without people being geographically located to a local area like they would be for an English football team or an American football team, that they actually support people from their hometowns or home areas. One of the only other ways you can get people involved in being involved in a team is if they appear to be a nationally based unit. Now, although that's not strictly true with LIV, you're just basically taking the players and then pushing them into a group to give them 4 players from a home nation. But it appears to be one of the only ways that you can actually get this team format to win and for people to actually want to support a team, because the players aren't strong enough to hold those teams. There's not enough personality really to be able to get people to engage with those teams, and without this geographic location function, it's very difficult to side with any specific team unless you feel very close to one of the captains or an individual player within that team. So that's the news out of LIV. There's a reasonable amount, but none of it is groundbreaking. Nothing that's really going to change things. I think the 72-hole change is still going to be the biggest announcement from LIV that we've seen so far. And I'm not really sure that they're going to be throwing millions and millions of dollars to bring some players in. I think you're going to be looking at some makeshifts who are on the edges of areas, some sort of known names to kind of fill in the gaps on some of the teams. What will be more interesting is when some of the bigger players that signed up right at the start, contracts begin to expire, and whether they'll be looking to renew, what the deals will be, or whether there'll be then, a migration of players out of LIV. But we'll see. So just to finish off the news, there was consternation around the DP World Tour from Juice Luton about not being in the field to play the Nedbank Golf Challenge, which is a limited field on the DP World Tour in South Africa. Luton's issues about is how the field has been selected. He finished 33rd in the DP World Tour Road to Dubai in 2025, and that really he feels should have been enough for him to qualify for the Nedbank Challenge, which is a 66-player field. It does seem slightly weird that the 33rd best player on the DP World Tour can't qualify for a 2026 DP World Tour event with 66 players in the field. But obviously there's different people coming in and different invites, and some of the LIV players will want to play in that event. But ultimately, as it stands, he commented on social media about this. He's actually one of the reserves for the tournament, but it does seem surprising that a stalwart of the European Tour who finished well up the order of merit can't get a place in an event like the Nedbank. So that's pretty much it for this week's podcast. The DP World Tour is now in Australia and starting its 2026 season down there before it heads over to South Africa for the Nedbank. Other major tours have now concluded their seasons. For a number of players, it's a time to assess, look back, look at where they're heading next year after a short break, and set their plans in motion to try and improve that 1% every day. In the coming weeks, we'll look at the tours in 2025, the highlights and the lowlights. We'll touch on the major championships, and we'll touch on the people that really impacted professional golf throughout the year of 2025 as we prepare for a brand new year of professional golf in 2026. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any information about any of the major professional golf tours. And in the meantime, I'm Graham, and I'll catch you on the course soon.